of the system are invisible to managers. Some may be difficult to describe, learned on the job, and well known by workers, perhaps, but impossible to describe in a way that's helpful. And there are some things that people know or do that they're not even aware of.
Okay, that's the break that tells us, okay, let's move here.
Now, let's consider two types of mistake that can occur when a manager actually starts to set up a duplicate system to replicate a successful process. Firstly, perhaps he forgets that he was just trying to copy another process and starts trying to improve on it. Another mistake is trying to use the best parts of various different systems in the hope of creating the perfect combination. Unfortunately, attempts like these usually turn out to be misguided and lead to problems. Why? Well, for various reasons. Perhaps there weren't really any advantages after all, because the information wasn't accurate. Or perhaps the business settings weren't really comparable. More typically, the advantages are real enough, but there are also disadvantages that have been overlooked. For example, the modifications might compromise safety in some way. So, what's the solution? Well, I don't intend to suggest that it's easy to get things right the second time. It's not. But the underlying problem has more to do with attitudes than the actual difficulty of the task, and there are ways of getting it right. These involve adjusting attitudes, first of all. Being more realistic and cautious, really. Secondly, they involve exerting strict controls on the organizational and operational systems. And this, in turn, means copying the original as closely as possible. Not merely duplicating the physical characteristics of the factory, but also duplicating the skills that the original employees had. Reliance on a template like this offers the huge advantage of built-in consistency.
Okay, so the key to doing really well on this, I think, is to understand the logical progression of ideas. Is to understand that order, right? And so I hope you can see that as she goes, she often introduces it. She says, okay, there are two mistakes, blah, 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 blah. Firstly, but also this. Then she goes, there are many causes to these problems. What could these causes be? Oh, so she talks about it for a little bit, long enough to kind of introduce. It's almost an introduction to the section. And then she goes, okay, this is one, this is another, this is a third one. And e.g., this means for example, right? That's something we use in writing to say we are giving an example here. And so when she says the disadvantages were overlooked, for example, the modifications might compromise safety. So then we have modifications, which is another word for changes, and then might compromise safety. So it's the effect of changes on safety. The word compromise means it might break or ruin or cause problems with. Okay? So you can say, oh, if we do this, it could compromise our safety, create problems for safety. Okay? And then here in this lower part, what are the solutions? Of course, there are solutions to these. I'm not saying they're easy, but there are. And then she says, adjusting attitudes first of all. So you can see even there, she's using the phrase first of all to tell you that it's the first point. And then she'll go into the second point and say, secondly, we can do the, impose rigorous controls. And then thirdly, copy the original very closely. And here she says, not only not physical features, but something similar. Not only the, maybe it was physical attributes, I don't know, physical attributes of the factory, but also the skills of the employees. So this pattern that you see of not only this, but also this, tells you that these are the two things. It's sort of like saying 1, 2. Okay? So if you understand how she's listing things, then it should get more easier to know exactly what part you are on. And if you do that, then you'll be listening for the correct words. Does that make sense? Kashmir, do you find
Yes,
that
yes.
yeah, is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, good.